Today we're here with another video for Men's Health Week, and it's a fantastic, true pleasure to be here today with Jacob Hill Gowing. That's how you'll find him on LinkedIn, but in day-to-day he's known as Jake. So hi Jake, thank you so much for joining us. It would be brilliant if you could just introduce yourself to people.
Yeah, sure. Hi Lynn, obviously lovely to meet you as well. I'm Jake. I'm the creative head at BBD Perfect Storm New Macho, where we really try to tackle how men are kind of portrayed in the media and advertising, and try to create a more positive narrative around men. I kind of started in the industry about over 10 years ago now as an intern, and then a designer, and then an art, and then kind of moved to art director, because I much more wanted to get involved with ideas and how creativity can kind of make the world a better place. And that's why kind of New Macho resonates with me, because I think, you know, this isn't just about men, it's about liberating and empowering men to be a more positive force in the fight for a more equal and equitable world. So yeah, very, very interesting stuff, and it's great to talk to you about that today.
Thank you. I know we have shared passions in that space and want to achieve similar things. So you know that's why it's so meaningful to me to be able to talk to you today and share what you're doing with other people as well. So before we get into the conversation, I just wanted to ask you, how are you today out of 10?
I would say I am probably a 7, and that's more to do with the fact that this is my first ever podcast. So it's more to do with the nerves, if anything. But I think you know, I'm very much looking forward to this conversation.
Yeah.
And sharing, you know, my opinion on things and some insights that we found through our work with New Macho.
Brilliant.
I think ultimately there's this big conversation that isn't being had, and it's time really, if we want to create a more equitable world, that we really starting to have that conversation.
Yes. Yeah, I agree. And hopefully the conversation we're having today and the other videos I've created will start to spark that and make it more of a priority. So you've touched on what you're responsible for, which is coming up with creative ideas to engage with people's hearts and minds, deliver commercial results, but also bring about positive social change at the same time. But we can do that in 2 ways. So there are ads that feature healthcare products, which is an obvious way to have an impact on men's health. So I wondered, what have you learned that works? And perhaps as insightfully, if not more insightfully, what doesn't work when it comes to communicating with men and boys on health-related products specifically?
Yeah, I think speaking more generally to advertising as a whole, we've always taken the approach that we try to show and not tell when it comes to creating advertising for men and boys. You know, we're not trying to fix them, but we're trying to kind of liberate them from stereotypes and encourage them to express themselves more fully, and to have that kind of positive effect. I think, you know, showing that bright side of why they should take time to care for themselves and how that impacts not only their lives but the ones they love around them, people that they love for the better. In our experience, that's always been effective in the health space. I think a great example of that would be the work we did for Father's Day. I think it was during the pandemic actually, but it was for Dove Men Plus Care. We created we took a moment of care from Dad and turned it into a moment of care for Dad, that being bedtime stories. So we created this campaign called Dad Time Stories, where we took 3 different dads and kind of created this personalized picture book that asked them to reflect on that idea that by looking after themselves, they'll be be better parents and better partners. And that was kind of supported with a range of different communications, but one specifically being a headspace partnership, which where we created dad specific meditations. And we found that whole approach of being more we also strive to kind of show a more diverse and inclusive range of fatherhood. We found that approach kind of had not only had a great response in PR and social sentiment and people interacting with the brand positively. We actually found that there was a really big commercial positive out that as well. I think sales increased by something like value sales increased by something like 14%, which when you think of a brand in the realms of Love Men Plus Care, that is really huge numbers. So we've always found that when you're more representative of men, of the men that you're talking to, and kind of open up that box of aspiration, that it does have more results because men resonate with those brands more and are more likely to be brand loyal, and with that comes a positive impact on the bottom line. So positive for society, but also for the brands that are kind of taking the steps to be more open and inclusive in these spaces.
Yes, yeah. I mean, the language you've used there is fabulous. Like opening up a box of inspiration, because that's something people can really connect with. Showing, not telling. I think communicating with dads in all their guises in a way that really works for them and really making them feel something. And as you say, we've seen consistently with the work that we do with the Unstereotype Alliance that when you do get this right, it doesn't only have the social benefits you've talked about, but as you've seen in this specific case, also delivers greater commercial returns. So it's a bit of a no-brainer, isn't it?
Yeah, definitely. And I think, this seems to be, it's something I think we've known for a while when talking to women, and we can all point out the case studies of where this has worked incredibly well for brands with women, classic case studies like, the Dove Real Beauty campaign, This Girl Can. But it feels like there's been a little bit of a reluctance to look at communications to men in the same way. And that's what we really try to do here at New Macho. Look at communications as a way which inspire men to more truly kind of connect with themselves and understand who they are. In order to have a kind of a positive impact on the world. Right?
Yeah. I think there's a void, isn't there?
Yeah.
And I think there's a void for boys. I'm a single mum. I have 2 boys, aged 14 and 11. And I feel very strongly that, advertising and all media can really shape their own perceptions of themselves and who they should be. I think what's really important is the range of possibilities for them, because for such a long time we've had one stereotype of what it is to be a happy, successful man. But there's so many different ways, aren't there, to live that and be happy and content.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that's something that men haven't helped in stopping. We've kind of perpetuated that stereotype and kind of guarded it quite closely, this idea of what it means to be a man. I think only really now are we trying to truly look beyond that like narrow-mindedness of that definition and start to actually be truer to ourselves and start to define what that means ourselves, because I think only by we've almost persecuted ourselves in that way. Do you know what I mean? And I think now is the time to start to have that conversation where we involve, directly with men and invite men to kind of be a lot truer to who they are and understand who they are, because that's how we not only positively impact brand communications and advertising, but actually the younger generations coming through that do feel disenfranchised and disconnected.
Yes. Yeah. Um, and why do you think brands and businesses haven't taken it seriously enough? Why do you think it hasn't been a priority?
I think there's a wider issue in society around this idea that we've obviously been doing a lot of work as a society to kind of empower women and make sure that we're tackling women's issues. And I think actually, even in more progressive spaces, and I was reading some articles the other day about this, even in more progressive spaces, we tend to play down men's issues as not important because there's obviously there's huge strides to make when it comes to equality and equity and ensuring that women are put first. But I think, and I think sometimes actually men and boys in particular are almost made to feel almost not encouraged to kind of talk about how they feel because it's not seen as a priority. But I think if we want to create a truly equitable society, we need to be taking all of these issues kind of seriously, because in the same way that issues surrounding women and feminism has an incredibly impactful and important and positive effect on men, the same can be said the other way. By not approaching these issues and not talking about them and not doing something to resolve them, we've actually created an environment for a negative impact on society.
Yes.
And if we want to create that positive impact on society for men, we do need to start listening to them and understanding their needs and acting more equitably. That what might be right for women and that helps empower them might not actually be right for men. So we do need to, as part of the broader conversation, to create a better, more equal society. We do need to start having that conversation as well.
Yes, I agree wholeheartedly. So, and we've talked about some of the great work you've been part of and that you're doing, but if we kind of take a step back and look at how men and boys tend to be portrayed in advertising these days, what's your view on that, and how would you like to see it evolving so it can start to achieve some of the positive change you've talked about?
Yeah, I think stereotypes have been rife in advertising and in the media since they kind of began. That's kind of no secret, is it? And we all kind of know that the negative impact that on those being stereotyped has. We choose to focus on men and boys, but that issue of representation and diversity is obviously a lot bigger than that. I think there's a lack of role models generally, positive male role models. I think we often say, if you can see it, you can be it. And I think when it comes to men and boys, specifically in media and advertising, the box that defines what it means to be successful as a man is still quite small. It's still quite materialistic. It's still very much focused on what you have, not who you are. And that, I think, that's really led to men not feeling like they're represented, and especially the younger generations of men. It's led to a bit of disenfranchisement, which not only has a negative effect on things like mental well-being and personal relationships, but it's a bit of a snowball effect, which can have, and we've seen it's starting to have a wider impact on the society. And that's kind of why we always subscribe to this idea, even if men and boys are not the core target audience for a specific brand, if they are present and in the communication, they should have a much more positive and unstereotyped role as possible. but also kind of showing that diversity of aspiration as well,
Yes.
to open up that box and help men connect with who they truly are.
Yes. Yeah, that's wonderful. I think, I would advocate that a really key way to do that, if you want to connect emotively with your audience, you've got to really understand who they are. And Shakespeare was brilliant at doing that.
Yeah.
He was an amazing playwright, still probably the most read and the most played in the world. He was a philosopher, a playwright, and an actor. So he did all of the three things that I think advertising has to do really well to make a connection. But focusing in on that first one, really understanding your audience. And what have you learned about men on part of this journey that surprised you the most? And what would you say life is like for men today? Given you're getting so much closer to understanding them to be able to make those meaningful connections.
Yeah, I think it's a bit of a weird one, because I think we obviously had you obviously always view the world from your experience, right? And I think when you're kind of, more progressive, people tend to be in the creative industries, you kind of lose sight of issues that are kind of outside our bubble, right?
Yeah.
So in some of the research we've done, we found that what was quite interesting was that a lot of the way men are represented by advertising and the media actually made them feel worse about themselves. And that was and oddly, the extremist, version of that feeling was for millennial men, where 2/3 of them felt worse. I think if we want to change that, we kind of need to relax expectations for men, open up how we define aspiration, especially, and move away from that kind of traditional image of success that has been very narrow and materialistic, and has helped to perpetuate some of these more negative ideas around masculinity and masculine ideals. Because I think there can be a tendency still to value men mostly for what they have and how they look, and not for who they really are, and the difference that they can make in the world if they're invited to be kind of part of this conversation. I think we need to open up that definition of success to help men truly understand themselves and kind of who they are and how they can connect with themselves and others better. Kind of not just create inspirational spaces and visuals, but invite men to express their true selves and be part of these these bigger conversations, because I think men are a little bit confused at the minute. There's obviously these huge global conversations going on around things like and hugely positive conversations around things like identity and gender and gender roles and masculinity. I think we need to encourage men to more positively engage in those conversations, feel like they can be a part of those conversations, and help liberate themselves to an extent, define for themselves what it means to be a man. And that's why we try to show these different possibilities, because you have to help men go on that journey and find out for themselves what that means means for them. And I think that was kind of a light bulb moment for us. And we found through our research that huge mismatch between how advertising and the media portray male aspirations and what men truly find is aspirational to them. And that's where this kind of disconnection and this disenfranchisement is kind of coming from. As I say, where advertising often has traditionally fallen into that trap about to be successful, you have to have loads of money, or be famous, or have this glamorous lifestyle, or be very successful with women, or all of these kind of more traditional ideas of what success is. I think men today, and that's where we found that disconnect with, especially with millennial men. Men today are much more happier. They find success much more in what makes them happier. So things like relationship, friends, family, being content with their lives, and kind of doing work that not only that also serves other people. Finding purpose. Yeah.
Yeah, and there's a massive opportunity, isn't there, for brands and businesses to be at the heart of showcasing that. If you're the brand that helps showcase those possibilities and those aspirations, you make much more meaningful connections. There's massive power, I think, in that.
Yeah, definitely. And I think especially where, it's always good to get on the ground floor, isn't it? And be then you avoid this idea of kind of purpose washing, right? But I think just more generally in terms of things like encouraging brand loyalty, there is a role for brands in this conversation, which will, have a commercial impact. I think, but I think when brands do this, I think there's a huge need to provide boys and girls really with more positive role models. And brands can play a big role in that, especially when you think about the amount of time being spent on social media these days, and the polarizing nature of some of the ideas being shared around on social media these days, which I think those of us who are a bit older seem to kind of brush off as of like childish notions of and childish ideas, but actually, they're finding their way into the classroom, and they are having an impact on wider society. And I think brands can take the opportunity to kind of help reshape the narrative in a way which better equips men and boys to not only be a bit more critical in their thinking, but by doing so in truly starting to understand who they are and who they want to be in the world that they want to be a part of.
Yes, yeah, that's brilliant. I had a conversation with Mark Brooks, who I'm sure you'll know. He does a lot in the space of making the world a better place, a happier, healthier place for men and boys. And he talked about, what we need to change is society, not men. And I think advertising plays that role in shaping society, and then men can feel that they can be themselves within it, rather than feeling they've got to conform to the stereotype that they feel society expects them to.
Yeah, definitely. I think there's a huge role for advertising and the media in general to open up these spaces and make men feel like it's okay to be vulnerable and discover who they are and be true to themselves. And that's one thing that we identified very early on with when Fur started, and the guys at Nobody Perfect Storm started New Macho, and that's something it's a learning process, right? And we're not saying that we've got all the answers, but we're willing to go on this journey to learn more about men and how we can help them become better for society, right? Because it is a learning process, and it's not something that we're going to say we've got all the definitive answers on. But I think the big part getting anywhere is to start to have the conversation. It's things like the hard work that you've been doing this week in terms of getting those ideas out there. It's really going to help kick off this conversation in a way where men can be more vulnerable and not feel like they can't be.
I think it's brilliant that as a team you're specializing in getting really close to men and driving this positive change, because I think that closeness and that learning, it's not a static thing, is it? You're learning all the time. We're all learning all the time, and of course society keeps changing. But if you were to talk to other creatives like yourself, you know, they have an opportunity, a gift, to do this and to encourage clients to do this. What would you say to them to, you know, persuade them to come on board and
Yeah.
make focusing on men and boys and evolving how we portray them a priority, and how to get it right? What would you say to them?
I don't know. I think selfishly there is. I think there's a few things I could say. I think selfishly there is that. You know, we all got into the creative industry to kind of with these grand notions and ideas of kind of having a positive impact on the world with creativity. And I think, you know, selfishly that's one way that we can start to do it by having these conversations that people aren't having. That people aren't, you know, currently having, and starting to have those conversations. I think, I think, you know, if I was going to talk directly to creatives, I would say, you know, don't be afraid to make work that is reflective of the world that you want to be a part of, the world that you want to see, because, you know, I think we all have our different passion points, and I think actually that not only makes the work more insightful, but it makes it more inspirational and better. And that's in that sense, I'd say when you're kind of creating work, be mindful of that world that you want to create. You know, show it. In doing so, listen and open up the conversation to, you know, a more diverse group of voices. Be collaborative. But on reflection of, you know, learning and taking those opinions and experiences into account, don't be afraid to kind of go with your gut and what you think is right, because if you've done the listening and the learning, you will be right and definitely in a better position to defend the work than you were before. I think, you know, we take the approach that it is a constant learning process, and kind of the information that we have to hand now and the experiences that we listen to and opinions that we take on board, that, you know, they're going to change in, you know, a month's time, 6 months' time, a year's time. And I think if we view it as a constant learning process, that's the only way the world and the work continue to get better and more reflective of what we want society to be. I think, you know, beyond the creative reasons, there's obviously that, you know, I think we all have a belief in advertising, you know, back to that idea of why we got into it in the first place. I think we all have a belief and that brands can really positively impact society. And I think, you know, obviously men are a huge part of society as well. And I think, you know, commercially, if brands want to appeal to men, and our research backs this kind of stuff up, that if they want to appeal to men, they need to better reflect men they wanting to appeal to. Because I think to a certain extent, men have moved on from the ideas that are kind of being painted in advertising and media more generally, and if brands aren't careful, they're going to get left behind. I think that's one big reason why brands should get involved, because, you know, our own experience shows that it's not only good. This is not only good for society, but it's good for business as well. When brands better reflect men and their true values, what is really important to them, their true aspiration, is not only a positive impact on that brand loyalty. There's that positive impact on sales and that, you know, that reaches the bottom line. Definitely, there's definitely that commercial importance, especially when you look at all the research around the amount of brands that are just, you know, they won't exist in the next 10 years. I think, you know, brands need to start thinking about this if they want to remain relevant to men.
Yeah, you put that beautifully. I think, you know, maintaining that relevance and that meaning in people's lives through how you portray them is so important. And that concept of, you know, listening and learning and being open-minded to that. And, you know, I see through the work that we do when you do that well, and as you say, when it's a collaborative way of working, then it gives you the confidence to do bold, creative things, because they're the things that people will notice and pay attention to, and will drive that change. So yeah, I love that.
Definitely. I think it's a thing of everyone's entitled to an opinion, but if your opinion is informed by different voices and conversations, then you've got more chance of being right.
Yes. Yeah, because it's the audience you want to connect with, isn't it?
Exactly.
So a key theme from Men's Health Week is getting men to talk about health-related issues with other people, with partners, friends, family. What do you see that's already happening in society and culture with regards to that? Do you think there is change afoot? There's still a lot of loneliness out there.
Yeah, I think things are definitely changing. I think, from personal experience, things are definitely changing. I think, part of the problem is we're almost, I'm 33 now. I feel like we're almost part of this generation where there's been a monumental shift between those who came before us and the guys that are coming after us. And it feels like there is a lot of positivity out there, especially in terms of how people are, approaching masculinity and gender, and these really positive conversations about being true to yourself. I think, from a personal perspective, I don't feel like, when we were growing up, and that's my generation, I think there wasn't always that encouragement to kind of talk about how you feel.
Mm-hmm.
And I think there's been a lot of, I think there's that feeling that, we weren't even equipped with the skills to do so. Do you know what I mean?
Yes.
And I think that has a lot to do with, I think that is kind of what is helping to drive that reluctance to seek help. Because we kind of stupidly perceive it as a weakness instead of a strength. Obviously, there's a lot more positivity going on with the younger, the Gen Z generation. But I feel like even in my group of friends, they're all a lot of them are becoming parents now for the first time, and I think there is a cause for hope that the dial is shifting, because if you look at just watching how they parent now, some of my mates, they're a lot more hands-on. They're a lot more expressive in terms of and encouraging in terms of getting their kids to understand how they feel and express themselves, which I think is certainly going to have that a positive effect on the future of men. I think there's a lot of talk around men being in crisis, and I think there definitely aren't men that are in crisis, but there's also men that are doing a hell of a lot of good to kind of make a more positive impact on the world and the generations of men that will come next. I think I also think beyond that, men are really starting to wake up and realize that we need to do more collectively to tackle these issues. We can't just leave it to other people to solve these problems for us. And I think even in the case of just being more open and honest and supportive of friends and partners, that's definitely something I've seen have a more positive impact in my friendship group and the men around me. That idea of wearing your heart on your sleeve a little bit more and not keeping those things in, and having those conversations about, me and my friends have a lot of conversations around mental health, and we put importance on that. And I think that's something that's being seen across a wider society as well.
Yes. Yeah.
But I also think there is a bit of a danger, not so much as a danger, but I think we need to be careful that in these wider conversations that we're having, that we don't ostracize men as well. I think, that is where we could create more problems than we solve. I think we need to make sure that we don't, punish men and boys for being vulnerable and opening up, because I think that we kind of still have a tendency to do that, even in those more progressive spaces. to view men's issues as a distraction from those of women and the important struggle for equality. I think, no one's denying the importance of creating a more equal and equitable society. Women place very much at the heart of that. And actually, it feels like that struggle is what's kicked off this wider conversation. I think in doing that, we need to have that wider discussion around the role in equity and making equality a reality, because much like tackling issues obviously has a hugely positive impact on society, and that has a positive impact on men. Failure to tackle male issues will only have a negative one. And I think, I don't like using those terms of women's issues and men's issues, because ultimately these are issues that we face as a population. They're human issues, right?
Yes.
And I often think that is part of the problem with having some of these conversations. We need to open them up to be a bit more reflective of the society we want to create, rather than kind of creating camps that are talking against each other. Because I think we're all, as someone that sees himself as an intersectional feminist that has an interest in men's issues, I think we're all pushing for the same thing.
Yes.
So there needs to be a conversation that involves everyone in how we kind of make an equal society through equity.
Yes. I think there is a lot of implicit bashing of men and boys that happens, not necessarily intentional, but I think, putting myself in the shoes of my sons, and again, Mark articulated this as, women and other people in society have problems and men are the problem. I wholeheartedly disagree. I've faced some really difficult challenges in my life, and actually the male friends in my life have been a big part of helping me get through that. So we need to change the way we look at things and the way we think about things.
Yeah, definitely. Because I think it's quite reductive to look at those issues and just say that men are the problem, and I don't think it helps to bring men on the journey that we want all men to take. I think if we don't tackle these issues that are being labelled as men's issues, although I prefer to look at them as issues that face all of us.
Agree.
I think we're not gonna create that society that is more equal and more fair, and if we don't allow boys and men to express themselves in a positive way, we're only going to drive them to express themselves negatively.
We'll become more divided.
Exactly. And we're starting to see how that is coming to fruition with things like the manosphere and the rise of influencers like Andrew Tate and things like that. And obviously that's another huge conversation that we could have for hours. But, I think that's only driving men to take refuge in these spaces. We're creating polarized conversations rather than conversations that should be really bringing us together to solve these issues together.
Yes. Now we've touched on this a bit already, but one of the things that I think is massively powerful is role modeling, people being open and willing to share their personal stories. And I know, you've been on your own journey, as have I, and faced some challenges. So I wondered, what's your story, Jake? What have you had to face into in life so far?
I think, like a lot of men my age, obviously, I think a lot of men my age have kind of had to deal with, and a lot of people in younger generations. The world's getting a lot busier and more. We're more connected than ever, but more disconnected than ever. And I think
Yes.
with that, it is driving, everyone is kind of suffering with their mental health a little bit in certain ways. And that's something that I've definitely had to deal with, struggles with mental health and overcome them. As well as things like, I've had issues with physical health, but my advice to anyone is always, talk about it, because and open up and so you're almost then leading by example by opening up, especially when talking to other men. It's a great way to open up the conversation and show them that they're not alone and that they can feel safe in sharing how they feel as well, and help them truly express themselves. I think there is I don't want to call it a problem, but I think the challenge that men face is learning and can overcome is learning to listen without necessarily trying to solve the problem
Yes.
for other people. I think, I hold my hands up to, doing that, and you have to work very hard to kind of control that urge. I think a lot of men do have a desire to solve the problem, and actually that can come across as being controlling and telling people what to do, which only makes them want to do the opposite, which is why kind of, even that's why I use that example of leading by example rather than and opening up yourself, because from on a personal level, and even when we get into brand communications, that show not tell element so resonates with men, and I actually think it will help to make men more open and better at having these conversations and being part of these conversations. Help to brush up the stigma around sharing how you feel, because it isn't weak.
No. As you said earlier, it's actually the stronger thing to do.
Yeah. And I think, as well, we kind of, if there's something wrong, which I think that we all know our bodies and our minds well enough to know when that is, I think, make people listen to you and try to do something about it, have those difficult conversations. Because only by having them and open up can we start to mend and heal, really.
Thank you for sharing that so openly. I'm sorry to hear about the struggles you've been through, but I think it's, wonderful that you have opened up, you have shared, you have sought the help you needed, and, made choices in your life as well in terms of, putting that support around you.
I think you just have to I think the world is a better place if we're a lot more open with each other and how we feel. Like, wearing your heart on your sleeve can be seen as a negative, but it should also be seen as a positive as well.
Yeah, it means we connect with other people, doesn't it, by doing that?
Yeah, definitely.
Well, I wanted to thank you, Jake, for all the fantastic work you're doing. I can see from the conversation today how important this is to you personally. And, you're making a difference through the brilliant work that you're creating at BBD Perfect Storm, the Matcha, really championing for the importance of doing this and getting right, understanding the audience really well, but also who you are as a person, by role modeling and inviting and opening those conversations. So thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much for inviting me to be part of the conversation. As I said before we were recording, it's quite interesting to be able to reflect on what you're doing and try to understand that positive effect that we can all have in engaging in these conversations and not kind of shying away from them. So thank you for that. And I know you've also got a lot more conversations that you're going to have. So I look forward to hearing the outcome of those as well.
Thank you, Jake. Speak soon.
Lovely to meet you. Bye.